Hi, my name's Nick Park, and I'm here to help us bring the heritage home. I want to share with you a history, a testimony, a vision that is not just my heritage, not just the heritage of Ireland. It's the heritage of Christianity in Europe. It's the heritage of the United States. It's the heritage of the Christian church in the USA. You see, at one time, the Celtic peoples spread right across Europe. They controlled from Ireland in the west to Russia in the east. They pushed down into Asia Minor, where they were known as the Galatians, and Paul's letter to the Galatians was written to those Celtic peoples. Also, they sacked Rome and they controlled the city of Rome for more than 40 years. But then they were pushed back under Julius Caesar, who killed millions of them in an early form of genocide. They were pushed back by Germanic tribes, and eventually they were confined just to the British Isles. And then they were pushed out of England by the Saxons. The last Celtic king of England was King Arthur, the guy of the Round Table and the Camelot and all of that stuff. And then they were confined to Ireland. And really nobody bothered them there, because Ireland was considered the edge of the world. The Romans believed that if you sailed past Ireland, you fell over the edge into a deep abyss. So what was the point of even trying? And yet, these Celtic peoples, they weren't finished. God still had a plan for them. It was a plan that was going to touch the continent of Europe. It was a plan that has shaped the United States to what it is today. Today, more Americans owe their ancestry and heritage to the Celtic peoples that came out of Ireland than any other ethnic group. And yet most of them are totally unaware of that heritage. I hope that this short presentation is going to help us understand that better as we bring the heritage home. When we first came to Drogheda to start the work of the Solid Rock Church of God, we managed to get a venue to meet in, and it was a cellar underneath a store just behind these doors where I am now. And we had a group of young people gathered in there. I would come into town on my motorcycle in the evenings. There would be groups of teenagers hanging around on street corners, and I would just share my testimony with them. And gradually enough of them got saved that we could start church, and this is where the Church of God in Ireland began. And as we were preaching the word in there, we had a homemade wooden pulpit, and it used to rock from side to side, and we discovered that the floor was uneven. And so I went to the landlord who owned the property and said, what's up with the floor? Why is it like this? And he said, well, there's an ancient well on that spot. He said, but I was worried somebody would fall into it and sue me, so I filled it up with concrete to stop that happening. Now, that set me thinking, because just outside the premises was a plaque on the wall. And so I decided to investigate, and just follow me. I want to show you this, because the plaque on the wall outside, at that time it was old, it was covered with dirt. You couldn't even read it, what it said. But what he said about the well, it got me thinking. And so I came out here and I scrubbed some of the dirt off the plaque. And it said here that here was a well nearby where St. Patrick baptized the townspeople in 433 AD. That was the same year that Patrick arrived in Ireland, and that was where the first believers in Drogheda were baptized. So here we were at basically where the whole story of the Christian church in Ireland began, and here we were preaching the gospel on the very same spot more than 1500 years later. That's whenever you know that God is with you, and that's whenever we began to look a little bit more deeply about who St. Patrick was and what kind of church he established in Ireland. St. Patrick was a Welshman, and he was kidnapped by Irish pirates who brought him to Ireland and made him work as a slave. Now, eventually he escaped, but God put a burden and a vision on his heart to win the Irish people for Christ. And so he came back as an apostle, as a missionary, and he taught the Irish people about Jesus Christ, and he won them to the Lord. Now, when Patrick won Ireland for Christ, he used a scripture verse, one in particular. It was Proverbs chapter 18, verse 10. The name of the Lord is a strong tower, and the righteous run into it, and they are saved. And the Irish people took that as a prophetic word, and they actually began to build towers, like the one that's behind me right now. And they built these towers, stone round towers, all over the island. And these towers were strange because the doorway was not on the ground floor. The doorway was about 20 or 30 feet up in the air, and it would have a rope ladder hanging down from it. And the idea was that when invaders came, then the people would climb up the rope ladder, climb into the tower, and the last one up would pull the ladder up after them. And the invaders could burn the crops, kill the animals, but the people were saved. And as a result of that, whenever Saxon invaders pushed their way across Europe, even though the gospel of Jesus Christ, the light of the gospel, was extinguished in so many countries, it was kept alive in Ireland. And then God did something remarkable among the Irish people, because he took this little tiny nation, literally hanging on to the edge of Western Europe, and he began to use the Irish people to re-evangelize a continent. They went back across Europe. They went to the same countries where their Celtic forebears had come from. In fact, they brought their heritage home. And everywhere they went, they took the scriptures, they preached the gospel. And today, you can go across France and Switzerland and northern Italy and Austria, and everywhere you go, you find the patron saints of some of those cities, and even of the whole nation of Austria, were Irishmen. They were Irish missionaries. And for a brief moment in history, the Irish were the primary missionary sending force in the world. They took seriously the Great Commission, they took seriously their heritage, and they brought the heritage home. And it was the glory days of Irish Christianity.